The year is 1611. A group of scholars huddled around a wooden table by candlelight. Their faces are tense with concentration as they labor over the text that will become known as the King James Bible. Quills scratch against parchment. A bearded man pauses at a single Hebrew word, hello. He makes a fateful decision. He translates this ancient term not according to its meaning, morning star, or shining one, but instead uses the Latin word Lucifer. With this single stroke of a pen, a mistranslation is born that will reshape Western understanding of evil for over 4 centuries. Today, millions of Christians believe Isaiah 14 describes the fall of Satan from heaven. This passage has become the foundation for an entire theology about the devil's origin story. Artwork, literature, films, and sermons all draw from these verses to explain how Lucifer became Satan. But what if they're all wrong? What if Isaiah wasn't talking about Satan at all? In 1928, an extraordinary discovery was made when French archaeologists uncovered the ancient city of Ugarit in what is now modern-day Syria. Hidden within its ruins lay clay tablets containing stories that had been lost for thousands of years. Stories that would shake the foundations of biblical interpretation. In this video, we journey back to the world of ancient Canaan and Mesopotamia to uncover the true identity of the figure in Isaiah 14. We'll explore how a forgotten deity named Athtar, not Satan, is the key to understanding one of the Bible's most misinterpreted passages. This is not just an academic exercise. This is about unraveling centuries of tradition to reveal a text that is far more historically grounded, politically charged, and poetically brilliant than we ever imagined. For generations, pastors and teachers have pointed to Isaiah 14 as the definitive origin story of Satan. The passage has a gripping narrative quality that seems to describe a cosmic rebellion. How art thou cut to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. The story is compelling. A beautiful angel becomes proud, attempts to overthrow God, and is cast down from heaven in punishment. It's dramatic, it's memorable, and it's become deeply embedded in Christian theology. But there's a fundamental problem with this interpretation. When we look at the full context of Isaiah 14, we discover something surprising. The passage explicitly states it's about a human king. In verse 4, Isaiah makes this crystal clear. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, how his insolence has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers. This is not a cosmic drama about a fallen angel. It's a taunt song against a human ruler, the king of Babylon. The text identifies its subject unmistakably. So why do we keep missing this? The tradition of identifying Satan with Lucifer comes primarily from much later Christian interpretation, not from the text itself. Isaiah 14 is explicitly about the king of Babylon, using cosmic, metaphorical language to describe his downfall. But if this passage is about a human king, why use such cosmic, celestial imagery? To answer that question, we need to understand the vivid mythological language Isaiah was drawing from. Language his original audience would have immediately recognized. To understand Isaiah 14, we must journey back to the religious world of the ancient Near East, a world teeming with gods and goddesses, whose stories were as familiar to ancient people as Marvel superheroes are to us today. Among these deities was Athtar, a god from the Ugaritic and Phoenician pantheons, associated with the planet Venus, the morning star that shines brilliantly before dawn. This celestial connection is crucial because the Hebrew word translated as Lucifer in Isaiah 14 is Hillel, which literally means shining one or morning star. This deity wasn't limited to one culture or region. The god appears under various names throughout the Semitic world: Athtar in Aramaic, Athtar in South Arabia, Astar in Abyssinia, Ashtar in Moab, Athtar in Ugarit, and Ishtar in Mesopotamia. Despite these variations, all were identified with Venus, the morning and evening star, in both male and female manifestations across Semitic mythology. This isn't just a superficial similarity. Linguistically, Hillel corresponds directly to the Ugaritic word for Venus, the celestial body closely associated with the god Athtar. The association between Athtar and Venus was widespread across the ancient Near East. Venus was seen specifically in the morning during dawn, making Athtar literally the son of dawn, exactly as described in Isaiah 14. But Athtar's story, preserved in tablets from Ugarit, contains far more striking parallels to the imagery in Isaiah 14. According to Ugaritic mythology, Athtar attempted to claim the throne of Baal, one of the chief gods of the Canaanite pantheon. Athtar ascended to Mount Zaphon, the cosmic mountain where the gods assembled, and tried to sit on Baal's throne. Then Athtar, the awesome, climbed Mount Zaphon, ascended the throne of Baal, the Almighty, but his feet did not reach the footstool. His head did not touch the headrest. Athtar was physically incapable of filling Baal's role. He couldn't fit the throne. His attempt to ascend to divine kingship was a humiliating failure. The myth continues. Then Athtar, the awesome, spoke, "I cannot serve as king. I cannot dwell on the heights of Zaphon." So Athtar the awesome descended, stepped down from the throne of Baal the Almighty. He became king of the underworld, lord of the river of the dead. This ancient myth presents a figure who was associated with Venus, the morning star, was linked to the dawn, attempted to ascend to a divine throne, wanted to become the high god, tried to establish himself on Mount Zaphon, desired to be like the highest deity, ultimately descended to the underworld, Sheol. Now compare this with Isaiah 14:12 through 15. "How you are fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High, but you are brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit." The parallels are not just striking, they're systematic and comprehensive. Every major element of the Athtar myth finds its counterpart in Isaiah's taunt against the king of Babylon. This isn't coincidental, it's deliberate. Isaiah is drawing on this well-known mythological narrative to craft his political message. In the ancient world, comparing a defeated enemy king to Athtar would have been instantly recognizable. A sophisticated poetic taunt that communicated divine judgment on human pride. The king of Babylon, like Athtar, had overreached his ambition and suffered a humiliating fall. The similarities between the myth of Athtar and the imagery used in Isaiah 14 are simply too numerous and precise to dismiss. Athar's pride, ambition, and eventual downfall make him far more plausible of a figure behind the passage than Satan, especially since the concept of Satan as a fallen angel doesn't appear in Jewish thought until centuries after Isaiah was written. What we're seeing is not a description of Satan's fall. It's Isaiah using a well-known ancient myth about Athtar to mock the pride and inevitable downfall of the Babylonian king. The chronology here is crucial to understanding the significance of this connection. The Athtar myth wasn't a contemporary invention, it was already ancient history by the time Isaiah wrote his prophecy. The Ugaritic tablets recorded Athar's failed ascent dates to the 13th century BCE, at least 500 years before Isaiah composed his taunt against Babylon in the 8th century BCE. Some critical scholars, which I'm very sympathetic towards, even suggest portions of Isaiah may have been composed or edited later, during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE, or even post-exile, maybe even all the way down into the Hellenistic period. But regardless of the exact dating, one fact remains clear. The Israelites deliberately harnessed an ancient, well-established mythological narrative as a powerful rhetorical weapon. This wasn't random. This was sophisticated political commentary, using the shared mythological language of the ancient world. When Isaiah compared Babylon's king to Athtar, he was effectively saying, like that ancient deity who foolishly thought he could sit on the divine throne, you too have overreached and will suffer a humiliating fall. The brilliance of this taunt lies in its cultural resonance. For ancient listeners, the Athtar reference would have immediately evoked a well-known story of cosmic hubris and failure, making the mockery of Babylon's downfall all the more potent. The case for Athtar, rather than Satan in Isaiah 14, is further strengthened when we examine linguistic evidence. At the heart of this debate is a single Hebrew word, Hallel. The term, mistranslated as Lucifer in the King James Bible, literally means shining one or morning star in Hebrew. But its significance goes much deeper when viewed in the linguistic context of the ancient Near East. In Ugaritic and Phoenician languages, closely related to Hebrew, similar terms for Venus were directly linked to the god Athtar. The tablets discovered at Ras Shamra, ancient Ugarit, consistently connect Athtar with Venus as the morning star. This isn't just a coincidental similarity. The linguistic evidence reveals an intentional connection that would have been obvious to ancient readers, but has become obscured over time, especially by using the word Lucifer. When Isaiah used the term Hallel in his taunt, it would have immediately evoked Athtar for his audience. Much like saying, the green-skinned monster would make modern readers think of Hulk. But a critical question remains. Would a Babylonian king have been familiar with Canaanite mythology about Athtar and Mount Zaphon? Many Bible readers might question whether a ruler from distant Babylon would know myths from the borders of his kingdom. The evidence suggests not only would he know these stories, that they were central to ancient Near Eastern royal ideology. Mount Zaphon, located in what is now northern Syria, wasn't just any mountain. It stood in the depths of a lush and dense cedar forest widely renowned as a garden of the gods. This wasn't some obscure local landmark, but a site of immense spiritual and political significance throughout the ancient world. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Mesopotamia's greatest literary work, describes a journey to the very cedar forest. When Gilgamesh ventures to cut down divine trees, he's traveling to the same vast forest that contained Mount Zaphon, the mountain of the divine assembly. They stood still and gazed at the forest. They looked at the height of the cedars. They beheld the cedar mountain, abode of the gods, throne seat of Urnini. From the face of the mountain, the cedars. Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 5. Kings from across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, boasted about traveling to this sacred forest to harvest its divine resources. They saw conquering this territory as a demonstration of their power over the divine realm itself. Pharaoh Thutmose III left a victory inscription boasting, "I brought away timbers of 60 cubits in their length. They were sharper than the beard of grain, the middle thereof as thick. I brought them down from the highland of God's land. They reached as far as the forest preserve. I sailed on the great green sea with a favorable breeze, landing in Egypt." This region was also famous for its precious gems, another sign of its divine status. When dignitaries from the area presented tribute to Pharaoh Thutmose IV, they offered, resenting the tribute of retinue, Palestine, and the produce of the northern countries, silver, gold, turquoise, and all the costly stones of God's land. For ancient Near Eastern peoples, this cedar forest and its mountain were as recognizable as Washington, D.C. is to Americans today. It was the home of the gods, a place of cosmic significance that every educated person knew about. Among the Babylonian kings who conquered this divine territory, none left a more detailed account than Nebuchadnezzar II, the very king mentioned repeatedly in biblical texts. His record of his expedition to Syria parallels Isaiah 14 with remarkable precision. At that time, the Lebanon, the cedar mountain, the luxurious forest of Marduk, the smell of which is sweet, the high cedars of which, its product, another god has not desired, which no other king has felled. Nebuchadnezzar boasts of an achievement no previous king had accomplished. What no former king had done, I achieved. I cut through steep mountains. I split rocks, opened passages, and constructed a straight road for the transport of the cedars. Most tellingly, he concludes by declaring himself everlasting king of this divine region, a claim that directly parallels Athtar's attempt to establish himself as divine ruler. This is precisely the kind of hubris Isaiah mocks by comparing the Babylonian king to Athtar. Nebuchadnezzar, like Athtar, attempts to elevate himself to divine status by conquering the mountain of the gods. The biblical text and historical evidence converge on a clear conclusion. Isaiah was likening the Babylonian king to the felled ascent of Athtar, not to Satan. This carefully crafted comparison would have been immediately recognized by the ancient Isaiah audience, who understood these mythological references. Let's look more closely at what Isaiah 14 actually says about the king of Babylon's fate. The passage makes several references to the king's downfall being accompanied by a descent to Sheol, the grave, but you are brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit. This directly mirrors Athtar's mythological descent. In the Ugaritic myth, Athtar is forced to descend into the underworld after his failed attempt to ascend to the throne. The king of Babylon is portrayed as a human ruler who has overstepped his bounds and is now subject to divine judgment. Isaiah 14 isn't the only biblical passage traditionally associated with Satan that deserves re-examination. Ezekiel 28 contains another prophetic taunt, this one directed at the king of Tyre, that has been similarly misinterpreted. The region of Tyre was located in the southernmost part of the cedar forest of Lebanon. Like the forest surrounding Mount Zaphon in the north, this southern region was home to many cedars, precious gems, and mountains considered to be divine dwelling places for deities such as Baal and Melkart. Mortal, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre and say to him. Like Isaiah's oracle against Babylon, this is explicitly identified as a message for a foreign king. Therefore, whatever mythological references Ezekiel uses must have been recognizable to his target audience. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering: cornelian, crystallite, the moonstone, beryl, onyx and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald. You were a cherub. I placed you on a holy mountain of God. You walked among the stones of fire. This passage describes a being with 5 key attributes: located in a divine garden, surrounded by precious gemstones, identified as a guardian cherub, associated with God's holy mountain, and connected with stones of fire. Many Christian theologians interpret this as a dual prophecy that refers both to the king of Tyre and Satan. But when we compare these attributes with what the Bible actually tells us about Satan, something doesn't add up. Biblical cherubs were not angels, as Satan is believed to be, but protective guardian beings with animal and human features. Satan is never described as being on a divine mountain or surrounded by precious stones. Most significantly, Jesus described Satan as a murderer from the beginning, who does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him, directly contradicting Ezekiel's description of a being who was blameless in your ways from the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you. A much better parallel emerges when we look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story known throughout the ancient Near East, including in Tyre. In this epic, we find Humbaba, also called Huwawa, a fearsome guardian of the cedar forest where Tyre was located. According to the epic, Humbaba was specifically appointed by the god Enlil to safeguard the cedar forest as a terror to mortals. The descriptions match Ezekiel's imagery with remarkable precision. In the forest resides fierce Huwawa. Huwawa, his roaring is the flood storm, his mouth is fire, his breath is death, to safeguard the cedar forest as a terror to mortals has Enlil appointed him. The epic goes on to describe the forest in terms that perfectly mirror Ezekiel's Eden. They beheld the cedar mountain, abode of the gods, throne seat of Ernini. 12 leagues he traveled and it grew brilliant. It bears lapis lazuli as foliage, bearing fruit a delight to look upon. Cedar, agate, lapis lazuli, cornelian, rubies, hematite, emeralds. Every element in Ezekiel's description has a counterpart in the Gilgamesh epic. The divine garden, precious stones, guardian functions, holy mountain, and fiery nature. The parallels are too precise to be coincidental, ladies and gentlemen. This connection makes perfect historical sense. Tyre had a specific relationship with Israel dating back to King Hiram, who supplied the cedars for Solomon's temple. This alliance had endured for centuries until it soured during the rise of Babylon. The taunt becomes even clearer in Ezekiel 28:15 through 16. You were blameless in your ways from the day that you were created, until iniquity was found in you. In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I drove you out, O guardian cherub, from among the stones of fire. Like Humbaba, who guarded the divine mountain, but was ultimately defeated, the king of Tyre once enjoyed a privileged position, but would now be cast out for his violence and sin. The parallel becomes unmistakable with the taunt's conclusion in verse 19. All who know you among the peoples are appalled at you. You have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever. This finality clearly doesn't fit Satan, who according to 1 Peter 5:8 is still prowling like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. But it perfectly describes the complete destruction of a human king being compared to the defeated guardian of the cedar forest. When we recognize Ezekiel's use of the Humbaba myth, the passage's meaning becomes clear. Just as the fearsome guardian of the divine forest was slain despite his power, so too would the once mighty king of Tyre meet his downfall due to pride and violence. If Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 aren't about Satan, where did our modern conception of the devil come from? The figure of Satan as we know him today evolved gradually over centuries, influenced by Persian dualism during the Babylonian exile, intertestamental Jewish writings, and early Christian interpretation. You might even want to look at some Greek influence. During the Second Temple period, 516 BCE to 70 CE, Jewish thought developed more complex ideas about spiritual evil, particularly in texts like the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls. These writings began to conceptualize Satan as a chief adversary to God, a far cry from his earlier role in the Hebrew Bible as simply an accuser or adversary, acting within God's court. The Satan of the Hebrew Bible appears in books like Job, where he functions as a prosecutor in the divine court, challenging humans, but still operating under God's authority. He's not portrayed as a fallen angel or cosmic rebel. Early Christian writers, influenced by these later Jewish conceptions and their own theological needs, further developed the character of Satan. By the time of church fathers like St. Augustine and Origen in the 3rd and 4th century CE, interpretations connecting Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 to Satan began to emerge. This interpretation gained momentum throughout the medieval period, becoming solidified with works like Dante's Inferno and Milton's Paradise Lost, literary masterpieces that powerfully shaped Western imagination about the devil. But as compelling as these artistic interpretations are, Athtar. They represent later theological developments, not the original meaning of the biblical text, which is what I want. For centuries, we've read Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 through the lens of later theological developments about Satan. We've missed the forest for the trees, or perhaps more aptly, we've missed the cedar forest for a single misunderstood metaphor. When we restore these texts to their original context, when we recognize the brilliant way Isaiah and Ezekiel drew on well-known myths to mock foreign kings, we don't diminish the Bible. We recover its original power of being clever. Making these passages about Satan actually robs them of their genius. The sophisticated polemics that Isaiah and Ezekiel crafted against these kings stand as a testament to how well trained and widely read they were in the literary traditions of the ancient Near East. These prophets weren't simply recording divine dictation. They were skilled writers who could engage meaningfully with the cultural references of their day. Isaiah's message resonates across the millennia. Empires that exalt themselves will fall. Kings who claim divine status will be humbled. The cosmic mountain belongs to God alone, and all human attempts to usurp divine authority are doomed to failure. This message isn't limited to ancient Babylon or Tyre. It speaks to every age, every nation, every leader who succumbs to the intoxication of power and the delusion of self-importance. And it speaks to us as individuals. The Athtar and Humbaba myths remind us of the fundamental human temptation to make ourselves the center of the universe, to ascend to the throne that belongs to gods alone. So while these passages may not be about Satan, they are absolutely about the seductive danger of pride, a force every bit as destructive as any imagined fallen angel. The ancient prophets' words, freed from centuries of misinterpretation, speak with renewed clarity to our world. They challenge every prideful human system and call us back to humility before the divine. How you are fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. Before I boast of such a creative video and try to ascend above the mountains, this script was written by Justin from Deconstruction Zone. Thanks for being a great friend, brother, and enlightening us with all of your insights. Be sure to subscribe and make sure you join MythVision's Patreon. We could really use your help. Thank you.